In the lead-up to GE13, both Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Rakyat have released their visions for Malaysia in the form of their manifestos. Pakatan Rakyat has promised, among other things, an end to corruption and racial discrimination, as well as free education.
Untuk pesawat-pesawat padi, pensuasaan bernas untuk syarikat kroni, untungnya bilion ringgit dalam beberapa tahun ini, tetapi penanam padi tidak mendapat manfaat. Kita merombak perjanjian supaya penanam padi mendapat manfaat.
Barisan Nasional's People First Teamed Manifesto has also offered greater security, improved public transport and big incentives.
Dalam buku ini, dalam aku janji ini, jumlah BRIM akan dinaikkan lagi. Secara beransur-ansur hinggalah kepada 1,200.
So will either coalition be able to make good on all their promises, or should Malaysians take the manifestos with a pinch of salt? KiniTalk spoke to Wan Saiful Wan Jan, the chief executive of independent think tank, the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, to find out.
This is the first time that BN really has had to contend with the party that's come up with the full-blown manifesto. How do you think that has affected the way they have come up with their own manifesto? Has it been a very populist one, or one in response to what Pakatan has done?
Well, I think if you look at the general picture first, the reality is Malaysian voters have never looked at manifestos that seriously. I think it's only this year, this time, that we are giving a bit more attention to the two manifestos that we have. Barisan is clearly feeling the heat that Pakatan is putting up, because Pakatan has been pushing forward several policy ideas through the Orange Book, the Buku Jingga, the Common Policy Framework, and now the manifesto. They have the alternative budgets that they put on previously. So I think Barisan has to show that they are capable of producing policies too, and that's why they came out with the manifesto that they have now.
And how do you respond to comments that they've copied Pakatan's manifesto? I mean, there's been a bit of accusations on both sides that one has taken from the other.
Well, but I think the reality is the two manifestos have a very, very similar spirit behind it, which is how much of other people's money can the government spend in order to get the people to vote for them. So when the motivation behind the two policies are so similar, it's not surprising that you find the symptoms or the individual bullet points to be very, very similar as well. So what we see today is not just Barisan. I think it's unfair to say that Barisan is copying Pakatan, and because the reality is both are copying each other. Pakatan is copying Barisan's existing policies of spending money on people, and Barisan is saying, if you want to copy us, we'll do even more. So this is really a competition between two very similarly motivated coalitions.
Okay, now let's just take a look at what both coalitions have done in terms of addressing the economic needs of Malaysia. I was reading your commentaries, and one thing you said, if Malaysia becomes Greece or Cyprus in 70 years, we'll be looking back and blaming it on this particular period of GE13. Now, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, but if we look at Malaysian history of since independence, all the previous prime ministers have been focusing on bringing Malaysia towards more and more liberalized economy. Najib actually started out trying to liberalize the economy. And that's why he published the new economic model as a policy framework for him economically. But if you look at what's happening now, in order to win the election, what they're doing is they're offering to intervene more and more in the economy. They're offering, basically both of them are offering to create a welfare state. In the sense that they feel that the public is trying to get something from the government, and they're trying to provide the things that they assume the public wants. And because of this, I think, give it 70, 80 years time, we will go into an economic, I wouldn't use the word crisis, but we will be nearly there. And if we trace back the reason of that crisis, that problem that we will eventually have, it is the beginning of the welfare state that started in this general election.
Okay, well, sounds like a dire prediction, but let's talk about the positives before we go into that. What has BN and Pakatan done right? What can the voter look forward to in terms of these two manifestos?
Well, I think if you want to look at the brighter side of the two manifestos, you have to look at the non-economic side. And that will be in the areas of maybe education reform, in the areas of strengthening the rule of law, in the areas of eradicating corruption. Both sides are talking the same language. Will make the police, make the armed forces, make the security forces more strengthened. So the non-economic side, both sides are promising some good stuff for the voters.
But in terms of practicality, and I know you did say for Pakatan you weren't really questioning the budget, but in terms, you just said there were bad policies overall. Now, what were you referring to specifically?
The reality is both manifestos are offering some very negative things, I feel. And this is in the sense of, we know that we have an entitlement culture in Malaysia. We know that there is a rentier behavior among many in Malaysian society. But none of the political parties are seriously trying to address this negative culture that we have. In fact, if you look at what they're trying to do, is they are trying to embed further the rentier culture, the entitlement culture that we have, by offering even more things for the public. The reality is, you have a society that demands certain things. You have two options: either give in and say yes, we will give to whatever you want, and then perpetuate the entitlement culture, or take the leadership position that we expect of our leaders and say, actually, what you're asking for is bad for us in the long term, and we're going to stop that. Unfortunately, both of the political parties are saying, we want to be popular, we want to be populist, and therefore we will give in and dish out whatever the public wants.
Okay, now one criticism you wielded is against the One Malaysia brand. You say that in the BN's manifesto you predict there's going to be more One Malaysia shops, One Malaysia, so on and so forth. And while this is going to be marketed as affordable, it'll in fact be actively distorting prices and heavily subsidizing it. So, yeah, what is your...
Well, the One Malaysia brand, for example, you see, in fact, if you look at the election, the way it's happening now is, the One Malaysia brand or the One Malaysia agenda used to be a government agenda. Now it has turned into a political agenda, into a partisan agenda. And I'm really confused whether One Malaysia is a government asset or is it a party political asset. The reality is, the One Malaysia brand today is being used to label so-called affordable items, and not much is disclosed about how these items become affordable. The business model is not really made public. I wish we know more about this One Malaysia business model. How do you create the Kedai Rakyat Satu Malaysia? But near the place where I live, there is even a Kedai Kain Satu Malaysia. There is a Kedai Ikan Satu Malaysia. There was a Tayar Satu Malaysia, given out to taxi drivers. It is getting to a ridiculous stage where the government is branding items and doing things to reduce the cost. And I think this reduction in cost is done artificially. The best mechanism to ensure things are out there in the market at the right price is by freeing up the market and let competition, proper market forces push down the prices. But what we're doing is artificial intervention, or what we're seeing is artificial intervention by the government, and this distorts the pricing system. In the long term, it is going to be a very negative one, because the government cannot continue to distort the price system forever. Eventually, they will run out of resources, like what we are facing with our oil prices today. Okay. For many years, the government has been subsidizing oil prices, but now they say, oh no, we cannot afford to do it forever. But they are continuing to do it.
Okay, now quickly before we go on to a different topic, one thing that has gotten people confused is Pakatan's promise to reduce the cost of cars and motorcycles. And one question we've been getting a lot is, what do you think about that promise, and how BN has responded to it and said, yes, we are also going to. Yeah,
you see, the car price debate is an interesting one to watch. Because first Pakatan says they will do something to reduce car prices. Then you see politicians from other parties say, no, we cannot afford to do that. If we do this, we will bankrupt the country. And then suddenly in the manifesto, they say, oh, actually, we're going to do it as well. So this is, just simply the way politicians do it. And then they start debating about, oh, we're going to do it this way, but they are going to do it the other way.
But do you think they'll actually make good on these promises? Like, is it practical?
They will have to. Because the reality is, whether they promise this or not, it is definitely going to happen because of the creation of the ASEAN Free Trade Area. The ASEAN Free Trade Area will will liberalize the market that we have, and car prices will definitely go down because certain duties, certain levies that we impose on imported cars, on cars generally, in fact, even Proton are suffering from the same tax system. They will have to be removed. So to me, there is no point in politicians promising this because we're going to have it anyway. Maybe initially Pakatan did capitalize on the issue, but the reality is it will happen regardless.
Okay, so let's move on to one of the promises they've made in terms of education. You were a bit critical of Pakatan's promise to ensure education up to for all, the egalitarian approach. Now, would you want to elaborate on that? So.
I have always been critical of Pakatan's approach on education because I don't think tertiary education should be free. In fact, it is a fallacy to say that anything is free. Anything provided by the government might be free at the point of use, but there is always cost behind it. Someone has to pay the salaries of university lecturers. Someone has to buy the buildings, build the premises and all that. So there is always a cost. It is not free.
Do you think BN has had a more practical approach to this?
Not necessarily. The thing that I disagree with in Pakatan's policy is their promise to abolish PT-PTN. You see, to me it is very simple. You take a loan, you pay it back. You don't take a loan, vote for somebody else and then ignore your responsibility. So that is me talking a very simplified term. I believe that if you take a loan, you pay it back, full stop. So this is why I think it is wrong for Pakatan to say we will abolish PT-PTN and whoever has been paying for the last I don't know how many years, you can stop paying by then. But that means the amount that you have paid back, are they going to return the money? Are they going to just let the money go? Say for example, if I have taken a loan and I have paid back say 15,000 ringgit, how is it fair for someone who has been paying the loan for the last few years, having paid 15,000 ringgit, but then somebody else who has taken the loan and then the loan is abolished just like that? So in terms of fairness, it is not there. But at the same time, what BN has done before this, not what they have promised, but what they have done, is introduce a system where students can take a loan in order to pay for their studies, and the loan is managed by a government-linked agency, if you like. This to me is wrong. It is not the job of government to give out loans. Government is there to legislate and govern, not be a bank. So, from the beginning, there is something wrong with the whole system. So I agree with the idea of government not issuing loans. So effectively that does mean abolishing PT-PTN. But I disagree with the idea that everybody who has taken a loan from before, you are forgiven.